Welcome again to our evening episode. Happy to welcome you all here again to one of our special guests and meetings. I am happy to welcome David today. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and you?
Yeah, fine too as well. Thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about you and yourself. What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I'm thankful for being here, especially considering it's a holiday in a lot of the region here. So,
Yes.
also to all participants here. So, my name is David. I work at SAS as a solution architect, and I'm mostly concentrating on Python and also some JavaScript. That's where this presentation kind of comes from these two passions of mine. And yeah, and I'm also, how you might see in the background, I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So that's why the Enterprise is behind me.
Definitely looks like that. Okay, it's absolutely clear. You're showing all your hobbies here. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So for everyone who is just the first time visitor to our episodes, short organizational issue. If you have questions during the presentations, you are always welcome to ask your questions. We don't hesitate because we are open to answer all questions. There's nothing silly to ask. So feel free to ask anything which sounds like, hey, I didn't get that ready. David, could you explain? I will listen to you. You also find a Q&A section. If you look in the navigation bar below, you will find the Q&A button. And if you click on it, there's the area where you can ask the questions. I will look at this and not the chat, please. That makes it easier to follow up. It might take some time sometimes to answer questions, but I will always see what you're doing. So welcome again, David. What are we talking about today?
So, kind of from my experience here at SAS and also looking at a lot of data science headlines, I I kind of get the impression that we do a lot of data science, but we don't make it into production, or when it's in production, it doesn't generate business value. And that's kind of frustrating as a data scientist. Well, I get to do my cool algorithms and get to ask interesting questions, but getting value for your work and being valued in your company is important, I think, to be happy in your job. And that's why I thought we should maybe take a look more on where our models end up and how users interact with them.
Sounds like a good thing. It looks like you're going to make us happy this evening, right?
I hope so.
So happy to have you here, and I would say take the floor. We will listen to you, and happy to see what you have to show us.
Thank you. So I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let me get the laser pointer because I normally use it. So the talk today is titled On a Business Mission from Model to Actionable Interface. And we already kind of got into why I think this mental switch to stop thinking about only data, models, algorithms, and these other types of techniques is important. And so I want to encourage you and kind of maybe show you the value in thinking about where your model will be used and who will be using it. Because, well, of course, there's environments where models run, but who is interacting with these models? What kind of knowledge do they have about statistics, about the data that's being used here, is important to make them accept the predictions that you generate or the actions that are presented to them. But let's take a step back, because I know you all guys have seen this screenshot or this paper from Google probably in every other data science talk in the last year or so since this paper came out. And I don't want to talk about the different parts, but what I want to highlight is that we as data scientists or as people who interact with data, we have a lot on our plate, right? We have to think about how do we get our data, cleaning it, knowing about algorithms, how do you integrate packages, how do you keep everything current? How do you monitor? And now some guy is going to tell you, well, actually, you also need to think about the user interface and how you should think about it. So maybe you say, leave me alone. I already have too much I need to know. So, but I hope to convince you that it's worth thinking about. And I'm definitely not advocating for you to learn some front end frameworks like React or even Django when you're staying within Python. I'm not advocating for that. I'm advocating for a shift in thinking or even communication with the front end team you're working with at your company. So I already said in the intro that I saw a lot of headlines talking about that a lot of data science is done, and well, we know this here, but maybe not a lot of it is actually being used, and there's a lot of factors for that, right? Maybe your data preparation is too difficult, maybe you're not generating the value that or you're not getting a good enough model to actually go into production. But the other thing is that, well, you have your analytics and you maybe have interesting questions, but did you take the step back and ask, does this interesting question actually raise any business value? Does it generate something for my end users? And that's why I find the statistics or this kind of projection that Gartner, they do it all the time, did now 2 years ago, that through 2020, only 20% of analytic insights will deliver business outcomes. Well, that means 80% of the analytics that is done might be kind of without value here. And looking deeper into their report, they actually mention also for the analytics stuff that it also includes like regulatory work that you have to do and even some BI stuff. So they paint a broad picture here for their value, but it's not a lot that's actually generated. So I think it's healthy to ask ourselves, maybe not only are we asking interesting questions, but are we asking relevant questions?
I mean, that are bad numbers, right? So 14.6%. That's wow. That's shocking.
Yeah, definitely. It's but seeing AI in deployment, I think that's we are seeing a lot more tooling around deploying AI models in the last years, and also with, of course, SaaS, but also the cloud providers are getting better at deploying those models into productions. And so this number, I expect it to increase rapidly in the next coming years. But the question is, okay, now my model is in production. Does it actually do something there, right? Or is it only producing scores and nobody's using them, nobody understands them? Maybe they even generate negative business outcomes because it pushes users away, it irritates people, might even increase your regulatory risk because you discriminate against ethnicities, genders. There's a lot of risk around AI as well as potential. So that's why I'm focusing on this question around business value.
Makes sense.
So we're going a bit on the why, and I chose a funny example to get started. When algorithms kind of recommend us stuff, it's not, if it goes wrong, if it recommends me something I'm not interested in, it doesn't really matter to me, right? And we see it a lot on Amazon that the algorithm just suggests you to buy some more stuff, even though you only needed the one. So like here in this example where this Twitter user bought a toilet seat, and now all that Amazon does is recommend buying more toilet seats. Maybe you have 2 toilets at home, right? But yeah, after that, it just gets ridiculous. And I actually Googled it. There's one guy who collects toilet seats. So maybe they optimized their model for him. But yeah. But what this could lead to is that people skip your recommendations. And a while back, Amazon actually did send out emails suggesting products to you, not not only in the user interface, but also per email. And a huge amount of people unsubscribe from those emails or mark them as spam because, well, you just got the same things recommended again and again. And this kind of decreases the value of these recommendation algorithms for them, make people trust less in them. So there might be harm even in such silly things like these. And I think YouTube is notorious for this. When you Google YouTube recommendations are, and then you get a lot of suggestions by Google itself, and they are all not kind to Google. And there's a lot of them, right? People always complain about, well, I watched one sports clip and now all YouTube is recommending to me is more soccer, and it's kind of ridiculous, and you can't really change those recommendations. You kind of have to wait them out till the algorithms notice, hey, okay, maybe you're not interested in it. You don't, or you can't get any feedback. Why are you seeing this? How did the algorithm come to the conclusion to recommend me those videos? And of course, you might say, well, it's just a YouTube video. Why should I care? I can just ignore those recommendations. But going a step further, we're going to raise the stakes, as the title suggests here. We have the problem with Amazon, right? It was widely reported, I think it was back in like 2017, 2016, around that time, that Amazon had a secret hiring tool that highly discriminated against women. And nobody told the AI to discriminate against women, but Amazon, especially in their tech department, had a lot of guys over the years, and that's also kind of representative of the tech community at large, right? But this AI enforced this stereotype and didn't even give women chance there, and it picked up on stuff, not the gender explicitly, but it picked up on colleges that are female only. So maybe the college Hillary Clinton went to an all-female college or university, and she would have been sorted out, right? Because the algorithm didn't know this university and would have been like, yeah, it can't be a good school if nobody that works at Amazon has been there before. So these kind of stuff, or even I think it was like women's chess club, and it picked up that it's a different type of chess club because the others were all men chess club or just chess club, and it discriminated against those kind of things, which is completely silly and can actually hurt the company, not only in reputation. I mean, we are still talking about it now, years later, but also it hurts them in their ability to get the best talent out there. So it's really harmful. And I mean, the idea might be an HR person's dream to get 100 resumes and automatically filter them, sort them, and get the best 5 and hire them immediately. But yeah, we have to think about the algorithms that are doing this. Are they actually fair? Are they representing us as a company as well, right? And that also, of course, taps into the ethics department, but it also taps into when you represent those 5 choices at the top. Are you giving them like a 100% perfect candidate, definitely hire, nothing can go wrong with him or her? Well, if you do this and the user doesn't have a knowledge of how these recommendations get created, he might start considering them as facts and accept them how they are, doesn't question them, and leave the choice to the algorithm without thinking about any human components. So I think this is dangerous. It's something we need to think about.
One question from Frank at the moment already, David. Coming back also to what you said before with the statistic data. Question is, can you please elaborate on how you measure value you have to create for what you do? Please be as concrete as you can. So I think he's probably looking for some kind of, that's the objective, and you can measure it that way, and so something like that. Any
definitely.
idea?
I have an idea at the end, which I'm going to tease now, which is kind of based on the business model canvas to generate value. But I think this to give one metric to focus on is, yeah, well, if you have if it becomes a metric, the metric becomes useless if it's the only target, right? But it's the interaction. You have to go into communications with the people who are impacted by your algorithm, and also the people who are using it in the end, who maybe requested something from you as a data scientist. So let's say you have you support process automation by extracting some features from images to maybe you look for fraud in those images, and then do automated decisioning and give that back, that result, feed it back into some central data store, and then a end user in your company reviews them and says what is fraud, what is not fraud, to enable them to make quicker decisions. And maybe the features that are interesting to them are wholly different than you are thinking about. When I'm thinking about the image, I might think, okay, I'm going to do some simple stuff like creating hashes on those images. Has it been sent in before? Trying to do stuff like that. I also know, but I'm no expert in image manipulation, but I know there is some noise stuff that gets created through Photoshop and similar applications that you can detect with AI. But these are maybe too advanced. Maybe all you need is extract the color, the make of the car, and already and compare it to the text the customer sent along with it, and see, did he actually damage his own car or did he damage a different car? So because those are different processes that you have to handle as an insurer. And then those meta information maybe matter more to our end user in the company than the cool fancy stuff we as data scientists sometimes like to think about, or even think about stuff like, yeah, I'm gonna estimate the exact value of that damage. That might even not be possible with the amount of data you have, but also might not help the end user in the immediate. So sadly, I can't be super specific on how do you measure that value, because I think it depends on the use case from A to B. And also it's kind of, you have to set those metrics and find them in the discussion with the people that are going to use the output of your model. That's maybe my best tip to create a measure is communication. As kind of tried and tired that story is, I think it's true. It rings true.
And there's another question from Rishabh, who's actually focusing on what you've just told us about Amazon and the recommendation problem, which is, I think everybody's kind of aware of or has been tricked by recommendations. He asked regarding the subconscious human bias. We can't protect ourselves from that kind of bias we have sometimes. And yes, that goes into the algorithms and the models. Is there a way, or do we have a suggestion, maybe it's part of what you're presenting today, how do we prepare the engineers to be better, doing better work here?
Yeah, we getting into the whole topic of ethics here, right? And I think that warrants a whole separate, maybe even multiple sessions. And I know you already had sessions on AI and ethics as well. And I'd say for business value, one aspect of business value should be not getting sued for your algorithmic results, right? I think especially in the European Union, we have a lot more regulations around that, and are even getting more regulations in the future with the, I think here, the EU is currently, I think just last month, they are showed their progress on AI regulations. And I think those types of regulations will help us to think about it. And from my perspective, just like with GDPR, created a business value in protecting your customer data and reducing the privacy risk to your customers, these types of regulations will create a business value in not getting sued. And also the ethics theme plays into business value by creating decisions that your company can stand behind, where you don't lose face in the public because of it. So I'd say you as a company have a business interest in keeping your subconscious bias of your data engineers, of your data, of your end users in check. And I think that's always been true. If you have racist people within your company who speak to customers, they will quickly alienate some customers. They might even track some. There might be a business case in that. I wouldn't want to get into that business case, but that might be something. But in general speaking, companies get punished for these kind of bad behaviors. If it's online, we see a lot of stuff on Twitter and social media in general with companies getting asked critical questions about the choices they make. And I kind of want to recommend the movie or documentary Coded Bias, which came out like end of last year. I think it's on the German Netflix at least right now. And there you can see different ethnicities and groups of people struggling with the impact that algorithms have and how they are fighting back against those algorithms and companies. And we saw companies making commitments that I think it was Amazon telling the US government, we are not going to sell you face recognition technology anymore. And I believe that customers will choose more and more the companies they interact with based on the values that the company represents. So that's, when we're talking strictly business, I think that's the value that you have to keep in mind. What does my company stand for? What do we want to represent? What do my workers even want to do, right? We as data scientists, we have a responsibility to not code our biases in there. But again, it's talk. I definitely have my unconscious biases and I can't solve them by myself. Again, communication. You can't find out your biases if you don't interact with other people in groups.
Let me jump in also with an aspect from my side, Rishabh, because you just asked the questions about subconscious human bias. One thing is looking at how we develop AI, and I have a development company as well, is that we try to be transparent with what we are doing as much as you can. So just for yourself to be aware of, hey, what kind of data am I using? And yes, it's just a learning. We are all biased because bias is human. This is something we need to understand. Bias is not something like it's just a bad thing. It's just it's absolutely natural that we are biased because we need to reduce the amount of information we have to take and process as a human being. So there's an inherent bias. And so transparency is one aspect. Build it into your design process and your software development process, that you maybe have even loops or to have some kind of mechanisms thinking about what happens if we fail in the model, in what we are doing. These kind of things, these aspects. And David mentioned, and that comes back to Frank's second question, communication. Yes, communication, I think, is a huge, huge thing. And it's something where you either have to learn the skills for communication, because it's not only communication in the team, it's communication to the stakeholders and to the market, of course. And seeing the gap of 20% only used analytics, which is crazy, really, which is really crazy. I would say, yes, communication is definitely a huge, huge thing. And yes, it's one aspect, Frank, because you ask here, it's communication or it's the user. I would say, yeah, user, it's always the case because you're building something for a user. And one of the questions would be, David, you said you had a look in the Gartner report a little bit. I don't know how far we get into the details of why all those things fail. But maybe this is just because it's not communicated well, or the goals have not set right in the right way, and maybe not with a user in mind. And the user doesn't need to be an end user, could be a stakeholder as well,
Yeah.
which is just another part of the story. Sorry for the long part from my side.
So it's always interesting to talk about these things, and I
yes,
will later also touch upon explainability as a way to make an interface more interesting and acceptable to the user. So explainability is also something we can build into our models, right? We can choose the type of algorithms we use to build white box models or black box models. We can also choose around, do we provide any transparency into that? Because I can build a white box model and then not provide any transparency to the end user. That's also possible. There's choices, and there's also, I believe there's room for both always, right? There's no 100% solution here. And to quick touch up on the bias again, I think there's also positive bias. If you think about your sports club, for example, of course you bias toward your sports club, and that's fine as long as you don't go around punching other people because they support a different sports club, right? So it's natural, and it sometimes gives us enthusiasm for stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks again, because we have really talked about, we have a model and we have a front end, so it's an interface to users. That's the core subject of today. And so why interface matter? Yeah, carry on, David. Why does interface matter?
Thank you. Yeah, the model isn't the final product. I think that's something we as data scientists have gotten more in touch with, as we learned that we need to monitor our models, also create maybe an API around our model so it can be consumed by a third party that might be internal or external. But why the interface matters and why even the API might not be the final product that you deliver is, well, of course, in the interface, the interaction happens. So the data that needs to be input to be scored by your model, how is the user inputting this? Is there checks and balances around those inputs? How are your results displayed? Maybe you return a 0.01 and then just that number is displayed. Maybe you want the front end to turn it into 1%. That's already more understandable to the user, right? And just this simple step might already increase the value that your model produces, because now you have a unit behind it. I think my math teacher always said, or always asked, no, it was physics. Well, what are we talking about here? Cookies, cakes, kilograms, kilometers per hour? What are you talking about? Unit is important. So 0.01 could be anything. 1% is clear to a user. Then, yeah, sure, the business value is created in the interface because now the output of your model is used. And only producing that output from your model doesn't generate any business value if it's never used. I think that's something a lot of people know from having a gym membership. Well, having a gym membership doesn't make you fit or more healthy. Using that gym membership, that's what makes you healthy, right? That helps you improve your lifestyle. So that's why it's in here. And also think of your model as a part of a process, of a service. It might be in a process automation. It might be one of the steps in there. Or also when you have an interaction maybe with your end user via chatbot. The interaction starts on the website, it's channeled into the chatbot, and then from the chatbot, you send them along to a specific subpage of your webpage, or you offer them a link to a service, and then they buy something or return something and get put into another service. So your model is only one of the cogs in this process, and that's important. And the last one is maybe kind of a meta point around it. It's that I might not be speaking for everyone here, but I like that my work is appreciated. And when I get good feedback from people that they tell me, yeah, I really liked what you did here. It helped me in my job. It helped to improve my workflow. Maybe You even see it in statistics pop up at annual company meetings, right? That we reduced fraud by 1-2%, which would be amazing, saves the company a whole lot of money and time. And in general, I find my typical end user, he doesn't care about the accuracy of my metrics, right? He can't understand or isn't even interested in the fit statistics and the cool ROC charts that I can put up and all these stuff, because he cares about how it helps in his process. And if you help him in his process or her process, then you make them work better, faster, make it easier to arrive at decisions, and they will come back to you. They will ask you more questions. They will maybe pay for a coffee when you can meet in person again, right? These kind of things I think is important to everybody. And also, this is from the Anaconda report from last year. The new one isn't out yet. How we spend our time, right? I think this is a widely known fact that we spend a lot of our time on the data preparation steps, and normally these kind of tasks aren't the most popular. I kind of enjoy them most of the time because you get a lot more familiar with the data, and oftentimes you already can generate value just by preparing better data for reporting, right? That's kind of fun to me, but a lot of people hate the whole data preparation stuff and would like to work only in these 23% down here. But let's now think about the fact from before that a lot of the projects that you do don't end up generating value. That would mean that you waste a lot of time with stuff you don't like to do, and they actually don't even generate value. So it's kind of like a double whammy, right? You hate to do it, it's useless, or not maybe not useless, but not very useful to your company. And well, you could have gone drinking coffee or do some more model tuning in the meantime for those 20. Maybe your company is better than 20%, sure. That's always a good thing. It's just general trends here, and maybe you always have perfect data and you say, yeah, I don't have to do all this stuff. I have my data engineers with me in my company. But I think a lot of us have to deal maybe with open source data sets, have to deal with diverse data sources, bring them together, and just don't like it. So that's why I think you also need to think about the interface to reduce the amount of time you spend on the stuff you don't like. And then you can have a better time doing the stuff you do like, knowing that it generates value.
If I think about what you've said in the slide before, you said, or actually set up a requirement that the model or the work you're doing needs to create business value. This kind of statistics you're showing here in the next slide,
yeah,
with the bar chart and the percentages, it doesn't not mention business value. Where do you think in the process does business value take place? Is it before it? Is it after the project or model building? What's the opinion?
Yeah, I think the business value is generated once your model is in deployment, in general terms speaking. But it could also already happen in the data cleansing or data visualization steps, because you might find some oddities in the data and start talking to maybe the IT department there, and maybe they realize, oh, we have some faulty inputs and we need to correct that, right? Or you maybe even uncover some weird behavior doing this, and it wasn't even your task to look for these kind of behaviors, but maybe you realized, weird, every Friday evening somebody sends $1 million over to a different outside bank account, and what is happening here? It's screwing with my model, right? I have a lot of outliers, and already detecting those could generate business value, but in general, I think we're talking after the deployment.
Also, just one remark to the last point in the listing. So with some feedback and positive feedback for the work you're doing as a data scientist, for example. One remark about the business value in the context when the model is not working. My personal opinion is quite clear here, because you usually start with a kind of business idea. Once it comes from business, and the business will be passed, so the idea will be passed on to the guys doing the AI stuff. And it's something like, hey, can we automate that? So this is the basic question. And the team might come up with, hey, yes, we did it. We did proper testing. We had a lot of models, but we finally came out that this can't be really automated. So this is a business value as well, because you finally find out that it's not working with the current models. Maybe sometime in the future, but just not now. This is a business value.
Yeah.
One aspect I think is from my experience, we can discuss it in as a team here. So back to all the participants here as well, is that not always business people do have the understanding of that. So it's the old software development thinking, which means you do something and it delivers the output you expect. And this is just not the case with that kind of AI stuff, right? You can't
Definitely.
predict it.
It could also be that they go to some fancy conferences where they get a lot of cool ideas what AI can do.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the real world and they ask for it. And then you go, well, you would have to purchase external data for that. Because we don't have the data internally, or you need it, let's say, some up to the second correct weather data. Well, of course you don't have that internally, so you have to buy it from somewhere. And then already it's okay, this might generate business value, but does it outgrow the amount of money you have to pay for this external data? That's also something that that's why communication is key. If you just get it on your table and then you start doing without kind of questioning it from your standpoint as well, and also talking with them where you say, okay, I feel comfortable in my ability to do this, and that. But maybe you have a focus on NLP, and then they come to you with vision stuff, and you'll be like, well, guys, I can start learning about it, but we are talking about at least half a year before I really am comfortable doing something like that in that field. Or maybe I don't even want to go into that field, right? So, but talking with them, explaining the kind of abilities you have and the software that you have internally helps them to also think about their business problems in those terms.
Yeah, and do you think, or do you have some ideas how leaders could help data scientists or the team to create value for users, how to support them to do that?
I think the important part is to enable these communications and not get hung up with hierarchy. So you can't talk directly to the guy in the business front because, well, you would have to go through me. I have to go to my manager and he can talk to that business line, and everything is lost in that chain of communication, and you have to go directly to those people. So giving the ability to freely associate with each other, and also enable an open communication, right? Let people throw out ideas, the crazy stuff that maybe nobody thinks possible, but maybe gets the gears turning, and don't punish people for bad projects, and also let them have part in the success. So maybe you as a data scientist feel like I did all the heavy lifting because I created the model. Well, would you have created that model without the input from them? So share the credit, right? Have an internal post celebrating what you guys did together. That helps foster a culture around data and data science.
Well, thanks, David, for sharing that.
So I wanted to talk a bit about the types of interactions. There's a lot of subcategories, and you might not agree with those two big ones I put up here, right? But that's what I like. If you disagree with these categorizations, please, I'm more than welcome to. These are more like, I'd say, guidelines than hard facts or categorizations. So what I want to say with automated decisioning is where you and have a process that has no more human interaction in the loop and routes through steps because of the output that your model generated. So that could be an automatic fraud detection that automatically maybe sends an email to the customer telling him, hey, we need to verify that you did this transaction, let's say in Spain, because you haven't been to Spain ever before. So you have some kind of, there's no more human in the loop there. That's what I call automated decisioning. And the decision enabling is the other stuff I've been mostly talking about, because there we have more interaction between the model output and the users, where you give normally somebody in-house, so within your company, some additional facts, or not necessarily facts, but data input to help them create better decisions. So maybe you raise a flag, hey, this could be fraud, and here is the reasons why. Or you maybe create some statistics around how likely is this customer to leave and quit our service. And then you give them maybe some choices how they could interact with the customers to prevent that, right? So this is what I call decision enabling. And what is important here, both can be done in real time, in batch, and in any time really, right? Because some of them might be mission critical and they have to be intercepted immediately. And that might be an automated decisioning, right? I would want fraud to be caught before it happens. And the customer gets charged on his account and sees, oh no, 100 euros were drained from my account. I would want to catch that beforehand. But I'd also maybe have some processes that run in batch, and maybe every week I score how likely people are to leave my service and then automate that decision. The same is with decision enabling. Maybe I send an email to my users here, contact these people, and I do this once a week, because sending them or maybe it's just not feasible to do it in a real-time environment, but I also have, let's say I'm in a talk with a customer and I guide and he wants to report a damage. I'm sorry I'm going back to insurance so much, but that's kind of the industry I'm mainly in. So if you're wondering why I keep getting back to damages and claims and these kinds of stuff.
So you're insurance biased, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm kind of proud of that. So when you're talking with the customers, maybe you guide your internal user who speaks with the customers through a process and ask additional questions based on the answers. And you have to handle that in real time, because you can't wait when you're on a talk and then the other person is like, yeah, I have to wait 10 seconds for the next question to pop up. The customer might get frustrated rather quickly. So there's use cases for both there. And the other thing is, who is your user and what kind of statistical know-how does your user bring to the table? You might have internal users who have no data, or maybe statistical know-how, maybe data literacy might be a better term there in general. But when you present them with a result from your model, do they accept it as the holy truth and only the truth and God-given facts? Or are they able to question these choices? This might be a cultural thing, so that people are questioned when they overrule the AI. Then you might quickly generate users who are unable to kind of interpret the results of the AI, because they just accept. Like me with cookies on the internet, right? I accept. I don't question it anymore. Who cares? And you might also have people in there who have a lot of knowledge about the data, and you might want to treat them differently, how you present them with the results. You might give a user with a high knowledge around data and statistics, you might give him more output of your model. You might present him, let's say you have a classification task, you have three you have three results there with a high percentage value. Maybe you say, okay, the thing that's in that image, I think to 90% it's cat, to 87% it's a jaguar, and to 80% it's a dog, right? And a user with a high knowledge around data and statistics, you could maybe present him with all those three results. A user who has a low amount of knowledge around that might get confused by that and might never trust your model again. So this image example might not be the best here, but I kind of think you get the gist of it. And the dimension that comes into play with external customers is that you get into more regulatory problems if you recommend them stuff that they don't like, or you come to a decision that negatively impacts them, and then you might have problems there. And so you have to think about that dimension as well. But there might also be users. Let's say you are a startup creating a consumable AI API. So you might assume that the user so it's a business-to-business company, the user who uses your API has a high knowledge around data and statistics, so he can handle that, right? So there's always these different types of users that you have to think about. Who am I interacting with here? What kind of knowledge can I assume the user has? Maybe the average user, maybe you go for the minimum user. That depends on the use case, of course. And then also tune and talk to the front end guys about how you represent your results. And
just one question regarding this slide before and the patterns you have been showing. Thinking about, is it something you use actually really to model the users? To say, okay, we need to think about two dimensions at least. That's internal, external user, and the kind of level of knowledge. And are you using it in the development process to figure out how you build communication strategies for different kinds of users?
Yeah, I'm using it when in those communication processes with the customer or the end user who is consuming the model. I'm asking them, what are you comfortable with getting? Would multiple results from a model confuse you, or would it enable you to make better decisions, right? So it helps to think about this. And this isn't a hard thing. So you can't, or I never go about having the exact spot on this graph to hit with a customer, right? That's pointless. It more or less maybe falls down to the quadrants. Who is my user? Is it maybe some other data scientists within the company? Then I already know how to talk with those people, right? Maybe it's somebody who's had math in school and hasn't thought about it since in a statistical manner, at least. Of course, we all do some maths. You can't live without mathematics. So it's more or less like a GRU tool, but it helps you think about the end user.
Mm-hmm. Diana, I think had a good input regarding the automated decision part you mentioned before. He said to allow automated decision feature to send, for example, emails to customers could be damaging for the organization, for the organization's image due to model accuracy rate, because maybe too much failure or something like that. Yeah. I am for sure definitely right to mention that here. I think that is part of the development process when you actually evaluate what kind of things or models you try to focus on. That you check what kind of damage could be caused by failures in what cases, and you need to be quite sure about that, and that's part of the development.
Exactly, you have gained nothing if everybody marks it as spam or unsubscribes from your email because your model sends maybe an email every day. No, I don't care about any company enough to get an email from them every day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe lottery. If you say, yeah, you won again. You won. So that's the only thing I would accept.
Yeah, true. So I wanted to talk or just give a quick, maybe kind of fun example of the types that can happen when your users are not data literate or have no statistical knowledge, right?
How would you say fun? But this is a divorce rate, right?
Yeah, I know it's divorce rate. That's not fun, but the correlation with the consumption of margarine, that's funny, I think. And when you look at this graph and maybe not think about it too much, yeah, this correlates highly, right? 99.26% correlation. I'd say that's a huge success. Put this model into production, predict divorce rate, and bet on it. But when your user is not data literate, he might take this as causality even, right? And not and not as the correlation it is, or as a probability that it suggests. And
I think I exactly know in what kind of business I have to be moved. So I'm going to sell margarine tomorrow, right?
Exactly. Maybe you run some ads on margarine and then short the supply of margarine or something. There might be a business case in that.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely. And there's, I think Tyler Vegan is his name. He wrote a whole book around those kind of statistics. There's a lot of fun correlations like that out there. So I want to go into a quick demo. I'm not going to dive into code here because we're talking about the interfaces. And okay, I was logged out. So let me extend the session here and log back in. And these aren't ready application interfaces that I'm showing here. This is more kind of like general things to think about when having these kind of conversations with, no, that was the wrong report. Let me quickly go back. That's demo, right? It always has to go wrong a bit.
But what kind of demonstration will we be looking at?
So I want to kind of compare some different interfaces or options to display model results, and
Right.
also talk about how they could look different for different users.
So we're really talking about the front end now.
Yeah, more or less, exactly.
Okay.
So, let's get out of the editing view. Sorry about that. Just talked longer than I thought I would to get to this point. Right. Okay. So in here, I have, in general, the model behind everything will be a random forest. I don't want to talk about why I chose a random forest. It's just an example, right? And the whole data talks about churn prediction. And now I'm kind of thinking about, okay, how would I represent results to a user? On a high level, I might be giving him something like a variable importance graph to the user as well. And in here, I have a global one. So the global variable importance, and that might help a user accept the model output a bit more. When he sees, okay, so the age has a high influence on the result that the model gives me, he might compare it to his own knowledge around churn prevention. And he's like, yeah, younger users tend to switch their insurance more often, right? That could be what matches with his or her own history. But going from a global to a more localized result. So telling the end user, okay, up here you can enter your customer ID, and then you get back the risk, and I'm also displaying it in green to indicate everything is good, right? That also helps. I also give some more detailed data about the customer, so you can have an even more informed choice. And then what's behind this 1% risk of churn? I give in this case, the Shapley value, so you get the kind of the contribution aspect of the different input variables on the output. So you can see, okay, because of the age and the overall trend in their premiums, they are unlikely to leave the company. And you're like, okay, right, this makes sense. Why would I contact this user with some, well, let's say, rebates or different promotion when I think it's a woman in this case, is unlikely to leave the company. So that's, I think, is a step up from these global variable importance. Going a step beyond that might be that I actually need to generate whole sentences for my user to understand. And these are all automatically generated. So I might need to do some reworking of those sentences, right? I mean, they're not, to somebody who's not data or statistical literate, these might be kind of hard to handle. But it could be an indication for a better step, really giving my end user whole sentences on that kind of output of my model. And let's kind of talk about how do I interact with the model as well, because the first three examples were only the output, right? The other thing is, we saw in the random forest, we had like 4 variables that had a high overall impact on my model. So it might be useful, or maybe check the accuracy, if I leave out some of the inputs. Here I have all these inputs that I have to fill out before my model will give me any prediction at all. And that's cumbersome for people, right? You always have the chances for mistakes. Maybe you enter the wrong age here, or maybe even a negative age, and all these kinds of stuff you have to think about. So reducing these kinds of inputs already helps if it doesn't impact the accuracy, of course, or the metric you choose to train on. So here I have it actually in a front end, a pretty simple front end. And I have reduced it to the 5 input variables that had the highest impact. And then I get a result, and I get 3 results. And this already, somebody with data science background, he might be, okay, I get hypothesis 1 and 0 and 1, right? I get these kind of outputs. I might be unsure what 0 means. Is that he's likely to leave, or he's likely to stay with the company? So this is kind of better from an input phase, but it's kind of harder to read the results that's in here. So I added the same forest again that we saw before, and I put a thing below it. I called it pretty output. And now, just to show it doesn't have to be interactive, I did this in batch. I don't want to see the test definition. I want to see the test result. So I ran it against one row table and got a prediction on the user, and I got a whole sentence back. So it took actually the same input variables that we saw in this application, but we took these results and turned them into a pretty sentence that my user can understand. There's a low chance and no action required. So now I gave the user something that he can understand, that's easily interpretable, and it's also actionable because you don't have to take any action, right? And I put these into different points. So I put 3 broad categories around here. And these would be something, changes that you would do to your model, thinking about the interaction with the end user. So think about the runtime. Must your model be able to run offline, maybe on device, on edge, then you probably have to reduce what kind of model you are using. And also think about the impact on energy consumption. Nobody wants an app that hogs all the battery life and they will quickly uninstall. So you might have a good result, but a bad customer interaction because of your heavy models or big models. And so runtime is important, right? The other thing that kind of filters through from the runtime as well would be multiple models. Maybe I have one that's scored in real time, and I also rerun those in batch and have a bigger, more accurate model that's pulling in external data and accessing my data warehouse and really maybe runs multiple types of different models in a pipeline and combines those results and creates a final output. But in a real-time environment, I probably don't have the time to actually reach out to third-party services. So it's for one use case, it might be relevant and actually create business value to have multiple models. Reduce input and output, I think that was clearly demonstrated in this quick kind of overview I gave. Having less input means your customer or your user is more likely to actually fill it out. He's more likely to avoid mistakes filling these kinds of things out. And also the outputs. If you have a user who's not familiar with getting like we saw in the model, we got 3 results back, right? The actual result, which was 0, then one for the hypothesis that he will leave, and then one for the hypothesis that he will stay. That's crazy to a normal end user. It's like, why is there not one output? So that's also something important, and also something which I saw, I did recently that did an Azure machine learning course. And there they, by default, return the input to the user. And I'm like, why? So in their example, they already have a filter step in there to filter out the input again. It's kind of, you would never return the inputs to a user if you don't have a good reason for it, right? So don't do it. And the last thing is add business rules to your model. And that means maybe you have to take into account specific business needs that have to be addressed and that your model can't handle, or even you take the output of your model and, like I did, I turned it into a pretty sentence through a business rule, right? You might have some cutoff points like on 25% probability for churn. You say, mark this customer for a review in 1 month, something like that, maybe. And then on 50%, 75%, and 100%. So you have different kind of configurations around your models.
One thing, how do you take care of, you said the user like reducing input output, right? So sometimes there's too much output in the front end, in the interface. Do you use user testing, or how do you make sure that the user will finally use it?
There, I found it most reliable to actually talk to the guys who design user interfaces. I think they call it user experience design, so UX. And they have a lot of tooling, and that's not like software tools. It's more like process tools and kind of checklists and these kind of things. And they will enable you to talk with the end users in a manner to gauge, is there too much output, too little? So I rely on the experience of real user interface designers, because I'm not one and I don't want to be one, but I need the expertise to make my end product relevant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from an architecture point of view, you have a model. Now you have a kind of middleware to the front end, right?
Which would be the API, the serving API, okay, right?
Yes. No, actually one on top of the API is the middleware, exactly. And then you have the front end, the interface itself.
Yeah.
With maybe its own logic.
Yeah.
And interesting is that you said you're extending the team now, right? So we have a team who's really working on the model. So software architect, software engineering, data science, both parts. And now you say, okay, when it comes to the interface, we need to think about someone who takes care of a user experience, the UX design.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, we need someone from business. So these are at least the set of people who need to come from model to interface, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Trajan had one question. How often does a model need to be retrained in production from your experience for new data with pretty low deviations? So the cycles, typical
That,
cycles of retraining.
yeah, that really depends on how volatile or changing your data is over time, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about like in insurance, maybe like churn prediction, you might not have to retrain your model every month. Maybe every 6 months is okay. Or maybe you also have some alerts built in that you see, okay, my average churn rate is rising, and then I will trigger retrain. So there isn't hard set rules, and it really depends on your data. But
Yeah.
I think if you spend too much time retraining your model, maybe the model doesn't make sense, right? If you have to retrain it all the time, maybe the data is too changing underneath that you have to develop other processes to reduce the volatility.
Mm. I think I think it's a really good point here to think about that, and thanks for your input, David. I was thinking about Trajan, for you as an example. We have, for example, we do business analytics on text. And given of some parts of analytics, I can tell you that only there's not too much dynamic in changes of the data, yeah, but the relationships actually which can be detected using NLP in that case. So I would say in a proper project, you would actually test it to see how in what kind of cycles do you have to update the model. So this is part of the software design again.
Mm-hmm.
And since you refer to healthcare as an example, yes, sure, medical data might change things more rapidly. I'm not sure. I think there might be a stable model. I'm not sure if it's a half-year cycle, for example, to update things and to check it. But again, put it in as part of a software design. Make it a question and say, okay, what kind of data updates do we need? This is a measurement, there's accuracy measures here which can be used, and it's just part of a project. Thanks, David.
Definitely. So kind of detecting data drift, right?
Yes,
That's
data
important here.
exactly.
And also, that's also something I'm coming to on my next slide, kind of, is when you're talking to the interface people, you might also get put into their change processes. And when they add new features to the front end, that might impact your model because they give more choices when input selecting, or maybe they put the input somewhere else and your users are interacting with your model later in the sales cycle, and that could have an impact actually on the validity of your model. So again, we're talking about communication, right? Have a change process when the interface changes. Get ensure that you are aware of that. Not everything impacts you, but it's good to know that. And also the other way around, if you change your API, tell the front end guys, don't wait for them to call you. Hey, I have this weird error. What does it mean? No, be preemptive in these kind of things, and that builds trust between you, and that helps you. Another thing is anticipate incorrect data. We all know garbage in, garbage out, and you always have to talk with the UI guys, because I believe that input validation should be handled by the front end. You shouldn't worry too much about it, but you should worry about it in, hey, I can only deal with these types of cases. Please only route those cases to my model. If you have this case, go to another step, right? Skip calling my model. That reduces wait times for the user, makes it more responsive, which is another point here. And also it avoids weird outputs. that you generate, and that helps you to build trust in the model. Also throw meaningful errors, right? When you get an incorrect input, or even you get a huge outlier from your model, maybe your model never hits 100% in accuracy or in its probability prediction, and if it does, maybe that indicates something fishy, right? So be prepared to think about, okay, how do I communicate error cases to my end users? And I'm not only talking about 404 HTTP errors, right? But also plan for outages. Your model will go down, will be unavailable. What does the front end do in these cases? Because if it heavily relies on the input of your model and you make the user fill out everything just to get an error message at the end because your model isn't available, well, then he wasted his time and might not come back, right? So again, think about how you communicate outages with the user in the front end. And also, maybe you are expected to deliver real time, but real time only means it really takes time, right? And so the front end kind of has to communicate for you that something is happening. The model is called and you have this little spinning animation, or maybe something is changing, a progress bar, something like that. Give the user feedback, have them not only hit a submit button and then wait for a result and nothing is happening in the meantime, right? That kind of frustrates you, leads to you refreshing the page, losing progress. Yeah, but you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that as a data scientist. You shouldn't think about these kind of things, but talk with the UI guys. Talk to them. Hey, I will return a result, and even if the result is an error, but please put a spinning icon on there, right? Something like that. And the last thing is kind of only in the UI, but where you maybe have to guide the UI guys as well. Help them, how do you display your results, right? I know a lot of people who really like the pie charts. I hate them personally, and I would guide them into different directions there and help them maybe with, like when we displayed percentages, tell them above 50% is positive, so make it green, please. If it's below that, make it red, please. These kind of things help the UI, because how would they know? Give them some guidance. It could be, this is a positive result, right? Don't tell them it should be green. Designers get very upset when you tell them which colors to use and which logos or icons, but tell them what's positive, what's negative. How you would display something like explainability to a user, and tell them why you would do it in that way, because they might have a designer intuition how you could display it, but from your perspective as the expert, it doesn't make sense. Also ensure that people are trained in the contact with your model. This might be as simple as following standards, but it could also be around how to read results, and that mainly is around internal users. And ensure that it's actionable. Maybe talk with the UI guys about when you have something like an email that could be sent out if the user wants to, have a button there that automatically pre-fills the email, but it's only displayed or clickable if the model results kind of provide that action. So that's something simple, but it could generate more acceptance and interest in the model and how you interact with it. And finally, create business value, right? That's what we are talking about. When people understand what they see and how to take the next step from that result, then they will do it, or they're more likely to do it. Here's another example why I think what does it mean is important to users. I think around 2015, 2017, in this kind of time frame, Netflix moved away from having a star rating for their movies to kind of a personalized percentage on different shows and movies. And I don't know about you, but with a star rating of 4.5 stars, I can think about what that means. I have a relationship to these metrics. I know kind of, okay, a lot of people or a lot of critics thought this is a good movie and something that I should watch. That doesn't mean it's good or I find it good, but it's a general indication. This 96%, I'm asking myself, what does it differentiate? Say it's 97%. What does this difference in 1% mean? How does it come to there? And also, I chose Brooklyn Nine-Nine. This is actually a recommendation from my own Netflix. I watched the whole series, and now it's a 90%, 96% match. I watched the whole thing. If I want to rewatch it, it should be a 100% match or a 0 because they think, nah, he doesn't want to watch it ever again, right? I don't get how could it be 96%. It kind of led to me looking at the title in Netflix and going to IMDb and looking at the star rating there. There's also a browser extension now doing exactly that because I think this metric, sure, maybe it increases their watch time. Maybe it's good for their business. But for me as a user, it's useless. It doesn't provide any value to me. And last, the thing from the beginning that I alluded to, the business model canvas. It's something that's, I think, kind of the standard now in the startup world when they create when they evaluate their business model and their idea. They think about these different kind of chapters and groups, stakeholders, how they could create value in the end. And I'm currently, this is just the standard template of the business model canvas. I'm currently formulating my own one that's more focused on data science and what you should think about. But I think in general, these topics are important. So cost structure, what kind of server hardware do you need to get your model actually running, right? If you have to have a NVIDIA GPU cluster to improve this churn prediction by 1%, and reducing churn by 1% only provides a business value of €1,000 a month, yeah, it's not worth it, right? So it's important to think about that. Also, key resources, who do you need? We now talked about maybe you actually need UX designers and the application developers to be in contact with you. You need to talk more with business people, but are they available? So thinking about all these kinds of topics, also key resource, of course, do you have the skills to do it? Do you maybe need a training? Do you need different software to do it? So I think it's a good template to think about it. And as I said, when I'm done with it, I will be sharing it on my LinkedIn. But it's still in a process that I'm validating with a lot of people internally at SAS.
Yeah. So I think it's a good point with the business canvas. And I know there are some adjusted AI canvases as well. We use it, for example, in teaching at Zurich HWZ. So it would be nice if you share your findings, as you said, at some point. And yes, people can get in touch with you on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also Twitter. I'm not very active, but
on Twitter, okay, good.
Yeah. And Chris Sacker, I think it's pronounced. He's one of the sharks at Shark Tank in the US. And he always says ideas are cheap, execution is everything. I think this applies to data science because normally I know data scientists have more pipeline. They are not waiting for work, right? They normally have a whole catalog of questions and ideas, but the actual implementation, generating business value, that's where you generate, well, now I said generate value when you generate value, right? But I think you get what I'm trying to say here, that you have a lot of work on your plate and you need to think about how can I take this idea, what it's actually worth, and how do I take it into production so that it generates and realizes that worth in the end. So that's why I like his quote here.
Thanks for that. So we're in the final round with questions. I'm just looking in what's still open here. Ryan had another question, which is probably a good fit regarding what you have been saying before, regarding the return on investment. So how do you sell the idea to the business?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also where communication helps, because you get buy-in. When you understand a business problem and you can formulate a solution, then you might be able to put an actual hard number on it. So you maybe could say, hey, when I improve churn by 3%, and that would mean for our business that we could save, let's say, $10,000 a month, right? And then I have some actual hard number behind it that people can get behind. That might not be possible for every use case, but when talking to the businesses or the business units, when you get them involved, listening to their input, you automatically get buy-in because they feel ownership in these ideas and projects. And that helps you to maybe get some more time to learn additional algorithms or tools, new packages, because they are like, yeah, we believe when you help us improve this process, it will generate value. We might not be able to put a number on it. I think the easiest use cases to put numbers behind are more or less process automation, because you normally can say, okay, currently it takes one user, let's say 2 hours a day, 2 days a week, and then you can multiply just the work time with their average salary and be like, okay, when it's automated, we save this amount of salary on this task, because now they can shift their focus on more important tasks. So that's normally where it's easier to provide these kind of information.
I think pretty good points to summarize it. Correct me if I'm missing something. So you said get them involved. So at least some parts of them should be involved. Yeah. And so that they feel part of the project, as you said. It prevents from divergence of people and work, right? That's a good point.
Yeah.
The second thing is provide a proof, a business case. That was what you said in the beginning. So we're going to do that and we'll increase the numbers by 20%, something like that. That's the hypothesis, we're testing, it costs X, and this is the return. Yeah, so thinking in business cases definitely makes sense. That's feedback from many people, by the way. So even if you're in the consulting business, I don't know, guys, what you're doing on your business on a daily basis, but if you're in consulting business or on IT software development process, selling your stuff to other people, yeah, definitely business case is the point. So no one is really excited about the model itself unless you're just the tech guy. Yes, cool stuff. I like that. Want to play with parameters. So business doesn't care, right? At least I think we're even bored at some point, and we think you're not focused on point. So we actually ask what David said in the beginning. We ask you for the numbers. If you can say, hey, that's an investment for a proof of concept, maybe of 50,000, something like that. And if we've done that, we know exactly that how can we improve the process, say by 5%. And this is 5% change in the process will result in 500,000 savings. I say, okay, prove it. 50K are worth it. And go for it. So we have a business case. Always think in business cases. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Thanks, David. That was very insightful. The last question from Frank, and I'll probably close the round then afterwards. It was a long time, it was fantastic. He wants to know to what extent is interaction, I think that refers to the staff itself, automation part. So to what extent is interaction between humans decreasing and machine-human interaction increasing? Just gut feeling, right, from you? And why? Why do you think?
I think it is increasing,
Yeah,
definitely. I think we all feel that, but I think there's a kind of a natural endpoint to that. Again, I'm going to show my insurance bias here again. We see a lot of customers who are willing to completely automate trivial insurance cases like car insurance, right? You don't really need a lot of consulting around that. But when we're talking about private health insurance, you might actually want a human interaction who can kind of relate to your case, who helps you through your difficult questions. And we are not in any state to kind of translate those interactions into machine-human interactions. We are a long way off these kind of emotional intelligence use cases. So I think the more mundane stuff is going away between when you interact with a business, but the harder cases, the edge cases, the cases where you want to be seen as a human, basically, because when I insure my car, I don't think about myself. I think about my car, right? I might think about, I need the extra package to get to quickly get a new car, but I'm not really relating that to me. But when I'm thinking about myself, I want actual interaction there. So I think that's something that businesses also realize, that they can't automate everything. I think the telecom industry is terrible at that. They do a lot of these automated call, and you have to press 1, 4, and I don't know a soul who has something good to say about their interaction with their internet provider. And that might be because it's too automated. So there's a business value there to human interaction as well.
yeah. I think all absolutely valid points, David. Just to add a few insights also from my side. Yes, the agency, as you said, this is killing, right? This is even killing the brand experience.
Yeah.
So I once had a question for IKEA. I was in a permanent loop, and it was just like finding a way to talk to a human. Frank, to your question, increasing, decreasing machine-human interaction. Yes, I think we all observe that automation becomes more and more present in our daily lives, but we also observe the pitfalls of it. And this is the kind of thing is you can automate a lot, but at some point you're talking about a kind of very distinct cluster of people. And if you have a deviation and you're not really part of that cluster, which is addressed by automation, you're just dropping out of the service line. And I think I'm just waiting for those industries who do a lot to automate at the moment to really think about the brand image and the brand experience stuff, because this is really killing. I'm not talking about things like how can I cancel a subscription. It's so easy to get to buy something, but sometimes it's really we like you to send in a postal mail back. So just to make it as tricky as impossible to stop. Or something I experienced from Adobe just recently, by the end of last year. So if you don't cancel the subscription 3 months ahead of time, it will be prolonged for 12 months. And if you cancel it too early, you have to pay for canceling it too early, which makes it less like, oh gosh, when is the date when this thing is running out? So what I'm saying in short, the action is so important for our models, and it has so many dimensions, thinking about brand experience, damaging an economy, damaging a society sometimes, because we cannot automate everything. It's just that. I think we're just still finding out what makes sense, what not. And I hope all those guys here and just joining us here won't have to suffer from that at some point. So thanks again, everyone. And yeah, by the way, we recorded the whole session as always. And yes, we will put up the video probably tomorrow again. It's usually very fast. David is, we are another David. not David White here. He's helping us with the video post-production, so it's pretty fast usually. And David, I really, really have to say thank you for being so patient with all those questions.
It was an interesting discussion, and I think the discussion showed there's no one solution to this topic, right? It is a communication. It's a process. So I really love this.
If you talk about communication, I can definitely say that you've done a good job because this was highly interactive, which is just as I actually wanted it to be. So you have been so dynamic in responses, and you did not lose your line and what you wanted to say. That was fantastic. Thank you very much again, David.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you everyone for just being here and being part of it again, for all the interesting questions you showed. And I hope you see each other again at some point. Have a nice evening, night, whatever time it is on your side. And still, we have Corona still going on, and I know vaccination takes some time. Stay safe, please. So see you again, and bye.